Hi, my name's Anna Schlotterman, and today I'm going to be discussing Alzheimer's disease and its effects on the brain and body. So some of the things that I'll be discussing are the history and the advancements of the disease, defining dementia and Alzheimer's, understanding the disease process in the brain, symptoms, causes, treatments, and possible prevention methods. I will also show a video that displays the effects of Alzheimer's on people and some of the research obstacles. And last, I'll discuss what some of the obstacles are, or the effects of Alzheimer's disease on families and caregivers. So going over the basic history of Alzheimer's, it was founded or discovered by Dr. Alois Alzheimer in 1906. And he basically did a brain biopsy of a woman who exhibited the symptoms that we now know today as Alzheimer's disease. And when he did this, he found what we now know are neurofibrillary tangles and plaques. But back then, he just saw them as clumps of things in this person's brain. From there, the 1910s to the 1940s were a time of not real discovery with Alzheimer's. Basically, they thought that senility and dementia basically just happened with old age, and it was a normal part of the aging process. However, in the 50s, they finally realized that the plaques and the tangles that Dr. Alzheimer had found, they discovered them in detail or investigated them in detail and actually named them. And by the 60s, they realized that Alzheimer's was a disease and not just a normal part of aging. They realized that people can age and not experience these horrible symptoms. By the 70s, the disease was recognized as a major public health issue, and this is when a lot of programs and organizations were created. In the 80s, diagnosis criteria was created, and the tau proteins were identified, which you'll see in the video we'll watch in a little bit. The 90s were the first drugs that helped with, not slowing, but helped with memory issues associated with Alzheimer's disease. And then in the 2000s, there were more drugs put on the market that just helped to maintain someone's memory a little bit longer, but by no means stop or cure the disease. Diagnosis criteria have also greatly advanced. And some, like I said, some of the symptoms have been reduced. So I want to go over just some brief definitions. What dementia is. And dementia is just a generalized term which describes an individual who has losses in memory, language, or motor skills. And it's due to permanent damage of the brain. Now, not everyone who has dementia has Alzheimer's, but everyone who has Alzheimer's has a form of dementia. And in fact, 60% of all dementias is Alzheimer's disease. Now, Alzheimer's is a degenerative disease which attacks the neurons in the brain, resulting in permanent damage and memory loss. And it's believed that the memory loss is due to these abnormal lesions, which are the neurofibrillary tangles and the beta amyloid plaques. And these are what Dr. Alzheimer had discovered, and they'll go into further detail in the video I'm about to show you. And the other term I want to go over is mild cognitive impairment, and this is the basic form of diagnosable memory loss. Everyone who has Alzheimer's probably had mild cognitive impairment, but there are people who are diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment and who never develop Alzheimer's. So next I'm going to go through the video. It basically describes what happens in the brain when these neurofibrillary tangles and plaques are present.
The human brain is a remarkable organ. Complex chemical and electrical processes take place within our brains that let us speak, move, see, remember, feel emotions, and make decisions. Inside a normal, healthy brain, billions of cells called neurons constantly communicate with one another. They receive messages from each other as electrical charges travel down the axon to the end of the neuron. The electrical charges release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. The transmitters move across microscopic gaps or synapses between neurons. They bind to receptor sites on the dendrites of the next neuron. This cellular circuitry enables communication within the brain. Healthy neurotransmission is important for the brain to function well. Alzheimer's disease disrupts this intricate interplay. By compromising the ability of neurons to communicate with one another, the disease over time destroys memory and thinking skills. Scientific research has revealed some of the brain changes that take place in Alzheimer's disease. Abnormal structures called beta-amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles are classic biological hallmarks of the disease. Plaques form when specific proteins in the neuron's cell membrane are processed differently. Normally, an enzyme called alpha secretase snips amyloid precursor protein, or APP, releasing a fragment. A second enzyme, gamma secretase, also snips APP in another place. These released fragments are thought to benefit neurons. In Alzheimer's disease, the first cut is made most often by another enzyme, beta secretase. That, combined with the cut made by gamma secretase, results in the release of short fragments of APP called beta amyloid. When these fragments clump together, they become toxic and interfere with the function of neurons. As more fragments are added, these oligomers increase in size and become insoluble, eventually forming beta amyloid plaques. Neurofibrillary tangles are made when a protein called tau is modified. In normal brain cells, tau stabilizes structures critical to the cell's internal transport system. Nutrients and other cellular cargo are carried up and down the structures called microtubules to all parts of the neuron. In Alzheimer's disease, abnormal tau separates from the microtubules, causing them to fall apart. Strands of this tau combine to form tangles inside the neuron, disabling the transport system and destroying the cell. Neurons in certain brain regions disconnect from each other and eventually die, causing memory loss. As these processes continue, the brain shrinks and loses function. We now know a great deal about changes that take place in the brain with Alzheimer's disease, but there is still much to learn. What other changes are taking place in the aging brain and its cells? And what influence do other diseases, genetics, and lifestyle factors have on the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease as the brain and body age? Scientific research is helping to unravel the mystery of Alzheimer's and related brain disorders. As we learn more, researchers move ever closer to discovering ways to treat and ultimately prevent this devastating fatal disease.
So I hope that video kind of clarified what happens in the brain. It does a much better job than I could have done. So now that you kind of know what happens when someone has Alzheimer's, I want to go over the prevalence and the statistics. As of 2000, 2.1 to 4.5 million people in the United States were diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And one study did find that there was no real difference between the risk factors of men and women of being diagnosed with the disease. However, it was found that African Americans were at a greater risk of the disease, and those with higher education were associated with a lower risk. It's projected that approximately 13.2 million Americans will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's by the year 2050. And it's crucial for us to think ahead and think about these numbers and think of the prevalence rate, because Alzheimer's disease is a huge, has huge needs of resources. And so it's crucial that we look at these now and prepare for the future and figure out the programs and services that will be needed. Some other statistics about Alzheimer's, roughly people have Alzheimer's for about 2 to 20 years. However, the diagnosis is usually later on from the actual onset. And the life expectancy